Thank you very much. My name is Eric Adams, the Brooklyn Borough President. I'm joined by my colleagues in government. I really want to thank them for coming out and assisting in convening this meeting as we talk about the issues that took place over the Labor Day weekend. We want to first, our prayers go out to the cameraman who was here earlier, and we believe that he's now being handled by EMS. He seemed to have some difficulties, and we hope that he's okay. And so I'm here again joined with Chief Powell of the Commanding Officer of Brooklyn South, Assemblywoman Latrice Walker, Councilwoman Darlene Milley, Councilwoman Lori Cumbo, the Councilman Jamani Williams, who is in charge of the Gun Safety Task Force and has really have been extremely vociferous around the issue around gun violence. We want to thank him, as well as Roy Hastig of Caribbean American Chamber of Commerce and several other leaders here from Juve, as well as Wiatica. Leadership is here joining us as well. And we just had a meeting of about an hour and a half, if not 2 hours, and just really talked about some of the issues around the weekend. And we really want to point out that our conversation and our goals is concerning violence after social events. And the conversation here of speaking about Juve is just one of the conversations around social events. As was indicated in the meeting, during July 4th weekend, we had in the areas of 14 to 15 shootings. So the issue of violence around social events is a bigger issue than pointing to one issue. We also want to get clear that the Labor Day weekend is made up of several components, and you can't take a wide-angle view and point to one of those components and state that this is the reason for some form of violent act. The Labor Day weekend includes Wiatica's a weekend of performances that take place behind the Brooklyn Museum, as well as the Children Parade, as well as the Panorama, and as well as the parade that takes place on Eastern Parkway. According to the reports of the New York City Police Department that was given to us today by Chief Powell, the events that came out of the Wiatica events were free of any form of violence. Then you have the event that takes place starting 2 a.m. Monday morning, which is many of you identify as being Juve. Juve occurs as the parade that leaves Eastern Parkway and travels up Flatbush Avenue to Empire Boulevard, and from Empire Boulevard to Nostrand Avenue, and from Nostrand Avenue to Midwood. That parade is separate from a series of other events that take place in and during that time. You have a large number of clubs, bars, and restaurants that hold events. You also have a large number of block parties and cookouts. According to the estimates from the New York City Police Department, you have over 250,000 people who are on the street during that particular period of time. And when you look at the volume of people and the volume of events, two areas in particular, Utica Avenue and Church Avenue, they have large volumes of people that you can't walk down the street who are not in the Juve Parade organization. So in order to solve the problem, you cannot broad brush the problem. You must identify each component of the problem and come up with effective solutions. And we want to say from the onset, Juve is a cultural celebration that has been in place for decades in the borough of Brooklyn and is part of a rich cultural experience. And for those who are calling for the end of Juve, we are saying no. We want to be clear on that. We are not joining the chorus that are calling for the end of a cultural institution that takes place in Brooklyn, as we would not call for the end of a cultural institution of the many diverse parades and celebrations that occurs in Brooklyn and the city of New York. We do not stop having 4th of July cookouts merely because some idiot discharged a weapon in one of the cookout celebrations, and we're not going to do that to the Caribbean community, which Brooklyn is the largest diaspora of Caribbean communities in the city of New York. Brooklyn is the way. And we believe by coming up with some modifications that we can create a safe atmosphere that Juve can lead the way in some of the other celebrations that take place throughout the year that have violence attached to it. One of the first items that we believe what we need to do is put together a task force that will comprise of members of Riatica, the New York City Police Department, Juve's committee, as well as some of our anti-violent organizations. Some of them are here with us today. We want all of these groups to meet together, but we want to do something else. We want to use this as a teaching moment. We want every parade and major festivities that take place in Brooklyn to be part of this body of people. We have a new Puerto Rican Day Parade in Brooklyn. We have a new Dominican Day Parade that takes place in Brooklyn. We have other major events that are occurring in Brooklyn. We want them to have members on that task force to come up with best practices. How do we stop violence at the end of these celebratory times? We want to utilize moments to deal with violence overall in the community. We want to have events throughout the year that educate our young people around these particular events, such as Juve. We want our faith leaders involved. And many of our faith leaders were here today. Reverend Terry Lee for years has talked about stopping violence with his march. We want to incorporate it in the Juve celebration. We want to take a look at the time. Does this time still fit to do the celebration of Juve we're hearing reports that sometimes the streets are closed at 12. The marches take to the streets at 4 a.m. Are these times still something that could fit in this environment? And we want to have an honest look at that to see how do we modify those times to make sure that we still have the spirit of a new day, which Juve represents, without going to an environment that is not conducive to the urban environment that we live in. We want to utilize ex-police associations. The Caribbean community has one of the largest number of ex-police associations, and Dr. Hastic brought that to our attention and how important it is to utilize those ex-police associations. We want to bring in young people as being young ambassadors to talk about Juve and what it means and many of the other cultural celebrations that we have. We want to refund SNUG and put the money back into SNUG, which was guns spelled backwards, that allowed the ceasefire model to be utilized here in New York City, throughout the state, actually. That's right. We want to bring in also something that's left off the radar. All of the promoters that are hosting events at bars and restaurants and nightclubs, they have been left unquestioned in their participation in creating the atmosphere that often leads to some form of violence. They must be part of that conversation, and we want to bring them in and have them become part of the conversation of how do we create the right atmosphere on the weekend. That is why it's so important that we broke down the various components to the Labor Day weekend so that we can understand how do we go after each one of those components and make sure that the Labor Day weekend leads the way on public safety, and use the model that we will take from this gathering as a model that can be used on all of our celebrations that happen throughout the year. Now we want to open the floor up to questions. If you have questions for anyone that's here, any of my colleagues, or any of the representatives from Juve, the president of Juve and his board is here, as well as Wiatica, as well as NYPD. We want to make sure that we pinpoint and answer the questions that you have. We are looking to convene this task force within the first week of October and ensure that all the parties that are involved will be heard and given opportunity to bring them forward. Hold on one moment. Yes. As it was shared, the police department shared with us that there is no permit process that was put in place for permits. And I recall of my days as a police officer, normally permits are not put in place for events that takes place overnight. And so that is a conversation we're going to have with the police department. How do they want us to move forward with that? Well, it did not take the shooting of someone that was assigned to the Cuomo's office, and our hearts goes out to the young man and his family. If you recall, several weeks ago, we had a coffin in front of Borough Hall for a week to draw attention to gun violence. And some of the organizations and groups who are here with us today, they have really been leading the way around gun violence. And last year, after the Labor Day Carnival, we were joined with a group of people to talk about how do we bring down the violence after the parade on the Parkway. And I'm sure the police department would tell you that they put in place some initiatives that we saw a substantial decrease in violence after the Labor Day Carnival took place on the Parkway. And so we're continuing. The act of stopping violence is not a one item, it is a continuation. And so we're showing the responsible adults that we are of making sure that we're looking at this issue, breaking down the components, and coming with solution based on the component. This is the same thing we did last year, and we had an excellent parade. The police department stated that all of the activities that took place behind the museum and on the Parkway, they were done basically violent-free. Well, that's why I think I wanted to make sure that that everyone understood. When you say Juve, oftentimes we call Juve the parade. We call Juve the 250,000 people on Utica Avenue and Church Avenue. We call Juve all of the parties that take place. And I'm saying to you that is not Juve. There are many components that happen on that day that is being pushed under the umbrella of Juve. And if we're going to find a solution, if you stop Juve but still have 250,000 people on the Parkway and an over-proliferation of handguns, all you did was put a cosmetic approach on a real problem. This is not a Juve problem. This is a public safety problem, and we have to approach it as that. Again, and that's part of the energy that's going to come out of the task force that will have the New York City Police Department present in it, and those who are part of the cultural understanding, part of the cultural behavior of Juve is a parade. That's part of the culture of that. And so we want to be sensitive to the culture and at the same time have public safety. And by having both parties in the room, we believe we're going to come up with an effective solution, and no solution is going to be left off the table.
Borough President Eric
The NYPD put an extra 1,500 officers on the streets for surveying surrounding organizations this year. What were the positive effects of that? What are we now in terms of arrests, confiscations? What was the impact of that additional 1,500 if any?
Well, I will let the chief respond to that, but I must say we really want to thank, as we did in the meeting, and we will continue to do, we want to thank the police department for their action. There were several arrests with guns. They were able to prevent shootings by arresting individuals with guns. They made arrests for felony assault and other activity. And I think that when you look at over 1 million people on the Parkway, 250,000 people out Sunday night leading into Monday morning, the different moving components, and you look at the manpower that Commissioner Bratton allocated to the festivities to make sure that people were safe, you really have to applaud the New York City Police Department for doing an amazing job of ensuring that people were safe. We had the large volume of people on the street, and the overwhelming number of them participated in the event and returned home safely. But I will turn it over to the police department if you want to comment on it.
Yeah, as the borough president said, that particular night we made 12 arrests for gun possession. We made as a matter of fact, in one of the shooting incidents, we were right there. We made an arrest on that. There were a number of other arrests, minor offenses made that night. We had, like you said, close to 1,300 officers on the streets. But controlling 250,000 people that are in the streets on a beautiful night, that was, quite a task. We had people assigned to bars. We had people assigned to clubs. We didn't get any violence that typically comes with bars and clubs. Our problem was the 4 incidents that took place, they were all on the street. And they were all within distances of our offices. We were right there, but due to the large crowd conditions and 2 of the other incidents, we weren't able to make an arrest right then and there.
Thank you, Chief. Yeah. Yes. Well, because we wanted people to be candid and open and feel comfortable enough to voice their concerns, and it was. People were extremely open and candid about their conversation. And, I think that although the job of an elected is to have their name printed in the paper when they make a comment, I think it's unfair to do it to community leaders when they want to come and be vociferous about a particular topic. To have them quoted, I think would be unfair to them. They did not come to the meeting to be quoted, and I didn't want them to be quoted in an unfair way. And some of them asked, can you close it so we don't have to be quoted in what we say? I spoke with Kareem Kamara, the former assembly person who was the liaison for the governor's office. He's a governor's staffer who has been in touch with the family to get the permission to come up and visit the family. And he said he was going to reach out to them and get approval and then allow me to come up and see him. I just don't want to be disrespectful to come up as they're going through this difficult period. He said that his condition is still extremely serious, and that we're praying for him and we're praying for his family.
Borough President, during your meeting, was there any discussion on whether the topic of race is contributing to the level of scrutiny that you may have raised receiving compared to other races?
People raised, I'm sorry? People have raised concern that to attach violence that come out of the Labor Day weekend to one particular group of body has a sense of unfairness to it when we are struggling with, in some areas, the issue of gun violence. We have a gun violence problem in the city, and we have a gang problem in the city that the police department has done an awesome job in correcting, but people have been concerned about the onslaught of merely pointing to Juve. And if one doesn't understand all the components of the weekend, then one may accidentally point to Juve as the reason for some of the things that happen. And our goal is to educate the public that is more than just the parade that takes place. There are other components to this problem that we're seeing. Thank you.